Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 12th episode of the ArtaCast. It's a very special episode, a very special episode as every week. uh, no, because this week we have the winner of the NA Continentals here. It's a great honor for us both. We didn't expect it, but he said yes, and he is with us. And LD, I hope you are not too angry if I don't ask you how your week was, because we have a lot to talk about. And I don't tell the people how my week was. I don't ask you how my week was. I just want to go into it, and I just want to introduce our guest. It's Ed. You probably know him all if you are a competitive player. It's you probably know him all. Hello, Ed, and thank you for being with us. And yeah, I'm looking forward for this conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah. I mean, I listened to you guys like your past a couple episodes and it's very insightful, like the meta breakdown and what's going on in like the Emerald Amethyst world, right? So yeah, it's nice to be on.
Yeah, that's good to hear from someone like you. It's also the Amethyst world is also a lot of pain sometimes, but yeah. Um, yeah, I just wanted to ask you some basic questions, because I'm just interested in, or the people will probably be too. Um
Mhm.
um First of all, what's your history of TCGs? What did you start, or what did you play before Lorcana? You probably played something before Lorcana.
Mhm.
Yeah, that would be my first.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I was a kid, I played a lot of like Yu-Gi-Oh!
Me too, yeah.
This was maybe like 20 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
like when it first came out, right? Like really, really long ago, maybe even more than that, like middle school. But I mean, I wasn't like a great player or anything. Like I think it's really hard for like kids to be good players
Yeah,
because
yeah,
you
yeah,
have some
yeah.
do and just like I feel like they say like your brain doesn't develop until like your 20s or whatever. I actually do believe that, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
like looking back, I
absolutely.
was just like a stupid kid, right? I mean, you're just having fun, right? Like it's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
like a serious.
It
I
was,
remember like
yeah.
back then.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
sorry.
mean, like I remember back then, like I looked up to like the Matt Pedals and the Dale Bolitos of the world, right? They're like traveling all over, the states and even some like other countries to play like the YCS, or I guess they called it like SJC tournaments, right, at the time. And when I was a kid, I was like, man, that's what I want to do someday, right? And it's very fortunate that like Lorcana came out and they have a really good like OP system, right? Where they have these DLC tournaments all over the states, and every month like you can go to a different place and go visit and see your friends. So it's kind of like everything I kind of imagined it to be, and it was a really good ride. um but after that, basically I played like some kind of just like FNM Magic, and I mostly played Draft, and I think
Mm-hmm.
like that kind of format taught me a lot about Lorcana, just because it's like a very like resource based game,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it is
Yeah,
like kind of different, right?
I can
And
see
I
that.
think the card game I spent the most time on is probably Hearthstone.
Oh, yeah,
Like
okay.
Hearthstone Arena, right? Like Hearthstone Arena, I think
Ah,
that's like the one that really teaches you a lot about resource
yeah,
management.
yeah.
And obviously there's a lot of luck, right? And like the cards you get. And eventually like I got into like an automated mode of playing that game where it's like you already see the quote unquote value trades when you play the game. And I think that helped me a lot in Lorcana, because I think I realized I'd like to gravitate towards like these value engines of Lorcana, and I think Ruby Amethyst kind of showcases that the best, right? Like they have
Yeah.
premier removal, premier card draw, and if you're able to always take those value trades, you'll probably get out ahead. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of like my history of card games.
Yeah. I think Ruby Amethyst is the deck. Yeah, they're probably the best deck. Then yeah, it's the you don't you wanna outvalue nearly anyone. That's your game plan. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
that's really interesting to hear. Like that, your experience with limited magic really lines up a lot with my own thoughts and feelings on Lorcana and what I like about it. When I was starting the game, especially in set one, I had some friends from Magic kind of asking, "Okay, what's this game like?" And I said, "Well, to me, it feels like playing core set limited. Like it's super just resource trade. The cards have very little text. So some of them that do have a lot of text are noticeably way more powerful than the others, as you're thinking back to like set one metagame. So yeah, really, really cool. That's kind of that thought and feeling is universal. You mentioned a little bit about liking the tournament structure of the DLCs and everything in Lorcana. Is there anything else gameplay wise that's kind of really landed with you and helped you stick to this game, or you think it's just like a nice, accessible, resourcey game?
Yeah. So I think the best thing about Lorcana is actually like the inking system. And I think this is kind of debated a lot where it's like, is it more or less skill intensive than Magic for that reason, right? Because in Magic, lands are lands, right? No matter what. But in Lorcana, anything can be like a land, right? So it could be like very punishing if you decide to like ink the wrong card or sequence improperly. So I think there's actually like a huge kind of skill kind of thing you can a skill expressive way to play the game, and that's why I think I kind of like it. Like I think it's kind of apparent that like a lot of the top players always kind of end up at the top, right? It's like, is it because of luck? I mean, yeah, there is a lot of luck involved. I think because of the inking system and kind of the altering system, right? Being able to pick and choose how many cards you want to alter versus like in Magic, your mulligan is like your whole hand and then you lose a card. So it's fairly punishing, I would say, in that game. But I think in Lorcana, it's a lot more generous, and you're kind of you're gonna be able to like execute the game plans that you want, like basically in every game, right? So I think that comes back to like the way I like to like build decks.
Mm-hmm.
Like I like to be very consistent, run a lot of like 4-ofs because I want to see like that game plan basically every game, right? And I know some people are like, "Oh, I want to run like 1-of so I can like see it sometimes." And if it's good, you can play it, and if it's not good, you can just ink it. And I think that is like to me, it's like somewhat of a flawed kind of thinking, just because it's like that card could have been something else, right? Like, yes, it could be ink, but you could actually play that card too, right? What if you wanted to play it? Then what?
Yeah,
Right?
that's
And
that's
there's
true. Yeah.
cards. Like there's other cards you want to ink, right? Like sometimes it's like you have multiple copies. That's when it's like, okay, you ink this one, right? But it's like I think there's definitely opportunity cost in, having those random 1-ofs because those could have just been like, part of your consistency game plan.
Look, my counter argument would be, especially for uninkables, like I would say Tremaine or Medusa. That's the best example probably. If you draw multiples, then you have more choices if you draw one Tremaine or one Medusa instead of two Tremaines or something. I still think it's a bit it's very you can talk about this topic probably for 10 hours. It's very, very interesting. But what you said, I think, yeah, for me personally, it's always more skill intense. That part of the game, the inking system is I can't see any upsides from the Magic inking system probably because it's also more skillful. I mean, the inking or the resource system in Magic has no skill involved probably. It's you play always your lands. It's not that you need to make decisions. Then Magic has some other things that are more complicated with this. You can do something with instant speed and then you can chain something and stuff. I think it's very different. Lorcana does this more easy way to I think to involve skill. I think it's not very complicated to make this inking system, but it's actually kind of clever for me to make this like this, because I think it's still important that it's appealing for newer players or for people that are not too into TCGs.
Yeah, just really quickly on that, I just wanted to say I think that like quite often there's a bit of a misconception, which is that because the inking system leads to higher consistency and can be a bit more forgiving than some of the like very punishing situations you end up in Magic where you haven't drawn lands or something, people see it as smoother, they're ergo easier in some way. Like it's more consistent, that there are less opportunities for things to go really wrong. And it really took a little while for it to sink in, like how much every single inking decision was basically an opportunity to make huge mistakes. It's not that there is that the consistency is bad or anything, but it opens the door to every single inking decision you make is super relevant right from turn one. Often, like, it's most relevant at that turn when you're having these things that are really important to your late game strategy, but they don't look important right now. It's not free. There is an opportunity cost with every single inking decision. So I think, yeah, people certainly seemed at the start to think, right, well, this seems super casual. This seems like a really easy resource system, which in some ways it is. But over time, we've realized how much every single one of those decisions can be massively skill intensive and the consequences it can have on gameplay down the line. So I think that I'm really happy playing this game with the resource system it's got. I struggle to go back to Magic now. When I play it, I kind of it feels so alien to me. But there's a massive expression of skill within this. I guess what I'm trying to say is it feels amazing to have a system where there is a huge expression of skill within it, but it also leads to consistency and makes the game feel less swingy, which is great. It's like an amazing situation, right?
I think I think one other thing is also like the altering system, right? Being able to pick between 0 to your whole hand amount of cards
Yeah.
that you can send back, and then I think that's what makes the game kind of fun, because I think even if people play exactly the same deck, you can play it completely differently, right? Like I think one of the things that and like me and Dave Solberg, right? We talk about is in our mulligan, it's like, do you keep your extra, one cost in your hand as ink, right? I think that's like one of the hottest debated topics. Like, do you keep the, guaranteed ink,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I think I've thought about like kind of I've tried it both ways, and it's like, if you keep your guaranteed ink, then it's like your draws will probably be a lot smoother, right? Because then you won't draw your one cost like down the line. That's why like it's really funny when people play Emerald Steel and it's like, what's your best opener, right? Drawing as many one cost Diablo as possible so you don't draw them later, right? So it's like the same thing, right? So it's like I have tried it both ways, where it's like, in Ruby Amethyst, it's like, oh, I want to have, Chernobog, Flynn, Sisu, Rabbit, or Genie, right? And it's like, do you keep your extra one cost? Because potentially, if you put those back into the deck, you can have a higher chance to find the nut combination, right?
Yeah.
But I think I'm at the point where I kind of like keeping the one cost. Like I think his idea, like, it makes sense to me. Like, you keep your, quote unquote worst cards in your opener, and you have a lower chance to kind of draw them down the line.
I tend to, the higher the competition it gets, the more risky I mulligan usually, because yeah, I just think sometimes I need to high roll in a big tournament or something. But it's very controversial. Yeah, I usually, I'm not sure about the mulligan sometimes personally, if I like it, because you initially think, oh, it's very good, it's very consistent, it's very, but on the other hand, you don't need to build your deck that much more consistent, because you can yeah, search for your opening hand that you like it. And some cards like Diablo Shift or something, I think it wouldn't exist if we had a mulligan system like Magic or something. Yeah, I'm back and forth. I don't know exactly if it's, but it's good to come into the game, and it's very good to have, yeah, like you say, you have always your opening hand that you can probably start the game with, and not bricking too much. Yeah, it prevents bricking, of course, and that's a good thing. Yeah, it's very.
I think on the flip side, I was gonna say on the flip side of that though, is like you said, like we can have these very consistent openers, and I think as like kind of Lorcana has evolved and there's more sets that come out, like you can have more and more of these kind of oppressive openers, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, like every game I can open Diablo Shift Cove, for example, right?
Yeah.
And you just turn the game into like a non-game, and I think that's what I kind of personally don't like as kind of time went on. Like I think my peak of like when I enjoyed the game was like set 2, set 3, right? When I was like Ruby Amethyst Mirrors, and there's no such thing as a blowout, right? There's no like, oh, I hit Turnbuckle Flynn Sisu and you don't have a way to block it, so you lose.
Yeah. I could see that
think
change maybe in years maybe, but yeah. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you.
I was just gonna say, yeah, like I liked it when the game was like much slower. Like I think now the potential equivalent is kind of like the Ruby Sapphire kind of mirrors, unless one person kind of runs away with like Huron, for example. But if you don't, and everyone has like the brawl for the hero. Usually it's kind of back and forth, and there's actually quite a bit of skill expression, I would say, in Ruby Sapphire right now, because also depends on how you build your deck, right? If you have very low on inkables, you can basically get to the point where it's like you have like all just gas in your hand, like in the mirror. Whoever has like the Tamato with like 4 dragons in their hand, they probably win the game, right? So I think there's tons of skill expression to like save your visions for the proper time, and
Mm-hmm.
just being able to ascend like assemble the hand that is like just all gas. So I think that's why I kind of like Ruby Sapphire right now because of that reason. But I think the meta is actually quite wide, and like if you tech for one thing, then you're not teching for another, and that's why it's like kind of scary to bring to like certain tournaments, right? Like if you just guess wrong, then you basically just like lost immediately. But back in set 2, set 3, you kind of have some expectation of all the decks, and you can kind of have more skill expression to not get kind of blown out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Speaking of Ruby Sapphire, we just want to shortly go about your run, no, not shortly. We want to go about your run and your crazy run into the NA Continental. Firstly, speak about your deck, because it was running perfectly. You showcased it in the, especially I think in the finals. You it showed the true power of your list, and I was curious. Yeah, okay. Let's speak about the deck first, and tell me when you build a deck, when you build a list. I mean, it's red purple. There's probably nothing too special in the base of the deck, but what your what your thinkings were when you build a list, or if it's especially for the tournament, or do you think it's a very general good list, or what? Yeah, what were your feelings when you built the list?
Yeah. So I think the, quote unquote, for me, the quote unquote stock list of Ruby Sapphire has like, the Chernobog Broom. Basically, the kind of like list that I always ran, even at DFW, it was kind of something like that, right? So I
Mhm.
would say before kind of Friday, like basically the entire couple months before that, my list was just like, 4 of, Broom, Chernobog, Snake, Flynn, Sisu, Fox, Friends, Brawl, Rabbit, Genie,
Mhm.
Elsa, Maui. And I think most of the time I think people know me as like the Tremaine guy. Like when I go play locals, like my
Yeah.
favorite thing to do is Tremaine, right? And I think it leads to like a lot of like really like blowout play patterns where it's Tremaine is very similar, I would say, to like Kyurem or Tamatoa. Like if I ever get to end tap with it and I get to like shift on it or sing with it, challenge with it, and then bounce it back afterwards, it's very, very hard to beat, right?
Mhm.
Because like once I have 2 Tremaines in my hand, then you're like, okay, how do I play around Tremaine, right? And usually playing around Tremaine involves you going wide. And if you go wide, I'll just play B prep, right? And then once I kill all your wide characters, then you have to go, narrow again, and then my Tremaine just come back and you lose the game. So I think my default list was also 4 Tremaine and 4 B prep. And then I think basically at LCQ, I kind of like, I didn't have to play, right? So I was kind of just like wandering around, and I saw a lot of people play like the library. And what I liked about it was that it was very hard to remove, right? Like a lot of people were kind of just like not running like some people were cutting like some amounts of Maui, and then a lot of people maybe only had like a couple of copies of Crab, and then Ruby Sapphire I think was like heavily disrespecting locations, but they still usually had maybe 1 copy of Hideaway, maybe like 2 or 3 Mauis. But usually that's not kind of enough to deal with like if I just decide to go really wide location wise, right? So I also played like a little bit on the online sim that will not be named, and like one of the top players there was also running like a library, right? And when I queued up into him when I was running Ruby Sapphire, every time that he played that card on me, I just lost the game immediately. Like there's just no coming back from the card advantage that card
Mhm.
kind of generates. So going in, I basically wanted to add that. And because I wanted to add that, I thought like, okay, like what are the good supplementary cards to
Mhm.
library? And I think Diablo made a ton of sense because like Diablo is the same thing as like Chernobog and Magic Room, right? It's able to kind of draw another card, and if any of those one costs go into the library, they basically draw 2 cards. So to me, I thought that was really really good. Like being able to like draw 2 cards. Friends is really good, right? We I know you guys don't run it Emerald Amethyst, but different deck, right? Different deck.
Yeah,
But
it's a bad
I
card. Yeah, it's a bad card.
yeah, yeah. And that deck is a bad card, I would say. Yeah, like you just want to go fast, right? But I think in like a value engine kind of style of the deck, I really liked having those kind of one cost being able to go inside library. Like I'm sure you saw like in the finals, like I was able to like put the broom in, forget to quest it, and then yeah, but yeah, just like being able to draw 2 cards, right? It's like really really good. So I wanted to add those. And then because of that, I also wanted to add 2 crabs. Like I know I've had like a lot of debates with people where honestly I thought crab was really bad. And I thought Maui was kind of the superior kind of quote unquote rush option, right? Just having additional challenger, being able to contest the board. But I started to realize that Maui was kind of getting too slow because like a lot of people are running these kind of dock based decks, right? Like they go like Daisy and then Piglet and then like Lawrence and then they go like Doc and then like spill their whole hand. And it's just like they go way too wide and by that time your Maui is like a little bit too slow. So I was kind of thinking like what are the earliest cards I can kind of play to interact with these type of boards and try to, maximum let them quest one time and then you try to make a comeback by either, shifting Sisu or playing Tremaine or whatever, right? So I thought Crab kind of fit that role very nicely, and it comboed really well with like the one cost and the library, right? You can put a Diablo in the library and then give a challenger challenge, draw 2 cards, and it's a really good kind of engine. So I really wanted to add a crab, and I think something else that I didn't have before Friday was also the big Sisu, and then I also realized that the big Sisu actually works really well with Tremaine and B prep because it gives you another angle of attack, right? Because after B prep, like the proposition for opponent is like, am I gonna play like small character and big character or many small characters or whatever combination, right? And I thought that the big Sisu actually helped a lot in terms of cleaning up a lot of these kind of small boards that people are trying to play around Tremaine, and maybe you don't have the second copy of B prep, right? And you need some way to kind of clean up these small guys so you're able to play your Tremaine. I thought Sisu fit that role very nicely, and also on turn 6 you're able to kind of shift and kind of take the board back. And usually it's like quite difficult, right? Because you kind of have to wait until B prep turn because we don't have Medusa. And I think one thing I missed about Medusa was being able to target things like when you're on the draw. Usually you're kind of on the back foot, and you need to be able to kind of pick and choose like the high value targets. So I think that's why I added the big Sisu to try to fill that role of Medusa. And but the main reason actually I cut Medusa was I thought that the Emerald Steel deck was going to be less popular because of the rise of Ruby Sapphire, right? So I cards like Beast, I think Beast and Robin Hood were kind of the 2 main targets for Medusa. And I think basically your Brawl and your big Sisu can kind of fill that gap, being able to kind of banish the 2 true strength characters. And yeah, like there's not that many 3 strength characters that you really need to worry about currently in the metagame.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, just want to say about the library. I got punished for saying in the past that it is. I thought it's not good enough, and I got really punished for that center because I was in a big tournament in Italy at the weekend, and I played a lot of mirrors. And actually, I got 1 or 2 games I lost to the library. It's like you say, it's very hard to remove. And I just expected it wrong that the mirrors are not revolving about the value game plan anymore, more about this genie who runs away more fast wins the game. It still is sometimes the case that it's just a race, but often it's still this who bounces more rapid wins games. And I just thought it's less than that, but it's actually it's really really good. And I think what you said, it's completely, yeah. Of course, it's right because you won, but
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
honestly, I could have been wrong, right? Like I could have been wrong. Like I could have had like even worse matchups, got unlucky, and it's just like you would have never heard about me, right? Like my deck list would never be public. I'm not saying anything, and then that's it, right? Whoever's the winner, oh, that guy's a genius, right?
But it's
Uh,
actually clever. I think it's always clever to add cards that are considered to be good but not popular right now, like locations or something. Maybe castle would also be not too bad in the tournament, because it's just a card that's considered always to be not bad but not targeted right now. Nobody thinks, oh, how do I deal with castles, and locations in general were not targeted at all. So I think it was very clever decision probably, and I think also, but maybe we talk about it later. Yeah, that it's very tricky to play with the library. I mean, there are so many lines. I think it's very skilled. It's very good way of skill expression. I think you need to know exactly about tempo, and you can't play the library too early or too late. It's a skillful card, and I like if the game has more cards that need skill to
or I was gonna say about like library versus castle. I mean, historically, I was like the castle guy, right? When it first came out, honestly, I really didn't like the card. Like when it very first came out, I know a lot of people at like the CCS event was running castle, but I decided not to run it because like I used to talk to like George, like prominent RP player, and he was like, I don't feel very comfortable playing a card where it's just like if it gets blown up immediately, you lose the game. It's like very very punishing. It's like I'm gonna hold my Maui and Fox until he plays it, and then he gets blown up, right?
Yeah.
And then I think as time went on, people started to realize how to play it. Like, oh, what if I just play them in multiples, right? Then the maximum they can remove is one, and you still get the tick from the other one. I think what I really didn't like about library was that or castle was that reason, right? Like it's very easy to just blow it up and you kind of just like lose a card for no reason. But for library, you can actually set up in a way where if you're kind of like on parity with your opponent and they have some exerted characters, you can just play library and get the immediate value. And then because you remove their character and you got a card draw, it's kind of like a double, you know, good thing for you and a bad thing for them, right? Because you remove their characters, way harder for them to remove. And even if they remove it, you don't care, right? You already got your value from it. And it gave like tons of protection, especially against like Ruby Sapphire. Like if I put a bunch of like characters in my castle, they just beat Prep or Sisu and it's like, okay, I got nothing. That's not great, right? But now you have like a kind of insurance policy, right? You put all your guys in there, they beat Prep you, you don't really care. You just draw your cards and they don't have any characters to deal with it, and you get to redeploy your cards, right? So I thought that was a better kind of way to have a draw engine over Genie. Like I think the main thing people talk about is, oh, there's no Genie, no Maui, no Elsa, and I think those cards were very lackluster against Ruby Sapphire because you play a Genie and it just gets blown up by Sisu, and it's like, okay, now what, right? Now they kind of have the tempo back and basically spend your turn doing nothing. And I think Genie and Elsa kind of come in a combo, Genie Wars. You have to kind of play them together and take out opposing Genies, or if they have the Elsa, they can kind of take out your Genie, right? So you're on parity with their Genie and Elsa. And then I think Maui, I think looking back on like all the times I kind of like lose the game is kind of like the reason is I have a bunch of like do nothing cards. Like most of the time when I'm losing, I look at my hands like, what's in my hand? Usually it's like Maui, Brawl, and then like a B prep or something, right? So basically like these things that don't really add that much to the advancement of my kind of winning game plan. And I thought library kind of did do that, right? It makes sense. Like it gains a lore. Like that one lore actually snowballs the game like insanely hard. Like it's like Spellbook. You remember when we played Spellbook? It's exactly the same thing, but like significantly better, right? So to me, it made sense to take out all those cards and like you kind of bypass that mid game. And I'm sure, yeah, of course, it's like significantly worse against other Amethyst decks or even like the Amber Steel. Like those matchups do get weaker, right? And like I said, there is definitely opportunity cost. It's not like, oh, you just add these cards, your deck is quote unquote better, right? I mean, it is quote unquote better, but it's better against other decks and like better against Ruby Sapphire and better in these attrition battles like in the mirror, and just worse in these kind of aggressive strategies where you don't have that mid game to kind of hold you off until the late game.
Yeah, that was the last question I wanted to ask about your deck list. I mean, it was probably built to. You want to face a lot of Ruby Sapphire and a lot of mirrors, I guess, right?
Mhm.
Or what would you agree there? So yeah, probably yeah.
Mostly, honestly, mostly it's just Ruby Sapphire. Like if
Mm-hmm.
you look at all the cards, I would say 58 of them are good against Ruby Sapphire,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
then 2 crabs are just ink. But even the crabs, some yeah, but I mean sometimes you can use them, right? I think I actually used it once in Ruby Sapphire where it's like you can buff up a Diablo and like challenge something that was already exerted or sang something. I think I challenged like a Maui or something like that challenged one of my previous characters. Yeah, or Grammatala, right? But most of the time that card is mostly ink, right? But I didn't want to like give away like all the matchups. I want to have like a little bit of something,
Mm-hmm.
especially on the right. I think crab really shines when you're on the draw. So I wanted
Yeah.
to have at least something in the deck where you can kind of have something that you can block and not just get like completely ran over by the aggro decks.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. While we're still on the deck, I had a question that's maybe a little bit more philosophical.
Mhm.
So one of the things we said going into when we were doing our episodes before EU and NA Continentals was general piece of advice: don't make sweeping changes to your deck the night before. It sounds like that was a fantastic choice for you. So I just wanted to
Yeah.
talk overall about. Obviously, you mentioned where the insights came from. You saw the LCQ a little bit, and then you made pretty significant changes. These are tight lists like red purple. It's not easy to find those slots to get things in. You've had to make some tough calls opportunity cost wise. Did you feel comfortable when you made those changes? Did you think I've cracked it, or did you kind of think this is a good idea, I'm swinging for the fences, but it should work out?
Yeah, so I played a lot on the online sim, and I would say top of the ladder is basically all Ruby Sapphire. That's all you see, right?
Mm.
And I do run. I play both sides. Like honestly, in the past couple months, I played tons of Ruby Sapphire. Probably the most is Ruby Sapphire, and then a little bit of Ruby Amethyst like here and there. But I felt pretty comfortable with Ruby Amethyst. Like I've been playing that basically like for a year, and like I kind of know like the general game plan. The only kind of new cards that were added were the or the genies, right? Genie, and then the Elsa came in before that. Besides those, I felt very comfortable running the engine, so maybe that's why I was also very comfortable with it, because I was actually more comfortable without Genie than with it, right? So I've never played with Library though, and I think that was kind of the hard card to kind of evaluate. But I did play with Castle, and I think you can kind of somewhat treat them the same way. But at the same time, like you said, there's a lot of like setup required for Library to be like max value, right? And I think honestly, like throughout the tournament, I was kind of like learning those lines, and I felt like I felt pretty good just because I knew that the Genie and the Elsa and the Maui were not good into Ruby Sapphire, so I actually felt very comfortable taking those cards out of my deck, and I was very comfortable with playing like the Tremaine, B Prep, Sisu lines already. Like I'm very familiar with those cards, so I felt pretty good going to the tournament. It was just a matter of like being able to set up like the optimal like library plays. I think the other fundamental difference is I've never played like more than 8 1-cost cards. Like Chernobog
Sure.
and Broom, I've been playing those since like the inception of those cards, and I was a huge proponent of those cards. And I remember back then, like a lot of people did not want to play Broom because like, oh, you needed something to kind of rescue it, right? To banish it and draw the card. But I thought that the extra redundancy was actually worth a lot, because the next best card after that was the Rafiki, right? The
Mm.
3+3 challenger Rafiki. And I would say the broom is basically the next best thing, right? And especially now with like Curse Merfolk in the meta, having something that you can challenge Curse Merfolk and then banish it right away to kind of save it, right? Because if you challenge
Yeah.
with Chernobog, yeah, you're exposing it to like a fox or like a crab setup, right? So it's not great for that reason. So I would say broom is like a necessary evil right now in this metagame. So it was a matter of like learning to play around Diablo and like crab. I think I played that card a little bit, honestly. Like I don't really like it that much, but I can see how that card shined in this kind of deck and in this metagame. So I decided to put those, and in my mind I did have like an idea, right? So you try to set up the triple ones, right? That I think that's like very popular amongst even like Emerald Amethyst, right? Amber Steel, like they love setting up triple ones, going extra wide. It's very hard to deal with. There's not a lot of sweepers right now, like in the other game. Like people don't run like for example, grab your sword or those
Mm-hmm.
type of cards, right? So I think going wide in my brain, it was like, okay, like, when I'm gonna play, I can do the, Chernobog, Flynn, Sisu thing, and then when I'm on the draw, triple ones with like a crab or Sisu setup. So I think it's also very important to have like a game plan in your brain, because if you do, then you can see what your cards look like and you can set up those plays. So in a way, you don't really even have to play the game, right? You can just have a game plan and then you try to execute on it, and then continue the game from there.
Amazing.
Nice. What impressed me the most, I want to tell you what impressed me the most, especially in your finals, and that's a question I wanted to ask you, is you played very, very good, of course, and you played very, very fast, and I felt really dumb when I watching you because I would have needed to think a lot longer in these turns, and I don't know, maybe that's wrong, but me personally, I play very fast when I get nervous. And I don't know, you didn't seem like to be nervous, but maybe you still was, and but it's still impressive how you played you made every decision right, in my opinion, and still playing this fast. Is it because you are that familiar with all these play lines? And probably, I think you played a lot
Yeah.
of Ruby Amethyst, and it's not it's something you played 1,000, 2,000 times probably, but the library is still a new angle, I think, to the deck, which I would have needed to think a lot longer to think about what's the best play pattern here. And but I guess you was just played so much in this game that you especially Ruby Amethyst, that you are so familiar with this play lines, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, about that, I think it's not as hard as you think it is, I would say.
Yeah, okay,
I think,
maybe,
so,
yeah.
okay, so I think one thing I've learned kind of playing the deck, like, yeah, like you said, I probably played like, thousands of hours of Ruby Amethyst, right? Even in the Pixelborn days, I had like thousands of games of Ruby Amethyst. And it's more or less still the same deck, right? Like you run all the value cards, like the bounce package, and once you get familiar with those cards, it actually doesn't take too long to kind of figure out the deck, right? But I think for me, something where like, it's like a flow chart, right, in a way, where it's like my inking decision towards like the mid or late game, it's like, what's the lowest cost card in my hand? I need to ink it, right? It's actually that simple. Like, it's not, it's nothing crazy, right? Like, you have a one cost in my hand to ink? No. Oh, do I have a Flynn ink? No. Do I have a Sisu? No. Okay. Sisu. Or something like that, right? So it's not that, like, to me it's not that difficult. Like you just ink like the lowest cost, and usually it works out, right? And I think there's certain kind of times where I play fast is like I already know what I want to do like a couple of turns down. I think the classic example of that is I think in game 4 where my opponent played shark on turn 4, right? So once I saw the shark on turn 4, my brain was like, okay, I just need to B prep this and bounce my rabbit as much as possible. How do I do that without exposing my characters, right?
Yeah.
So if you kind of have that game plan, you already like know what to do, right? Turn 4 rabbit, turn 5 bounce rabbit, turn 6 rabbit bounce, turn 7 B prep, right? So I kind of already like thought about that like way ahead in advance, right? And then after that, you can play the game and kind of think about what you want to do. But I think Ruby Amethyst, like, there's a lot of general like heuristics that you can follow that makes the game, I think, much easier to think about. Where it's like, oh, does my opponent have a huge threat I need to deal with, right? And I think some of the more common ones, like let's say for like the Ruby Sapphire example, like I would say like Maldragon and like Sisu, I wouldn't consider those huge threats, right? Is because like once they kind of triggered their effect the first time, they're just kind of bodies that lore, right? So I don't think they're immediate threats unless you're about to like lose the game, right? But if that's not the case, then you don't really have to deal with it immediately. And that's kind of like my thought process when there was a turn where he had both like a grandma, Maldragon, Sisu, and it's like, oh, how come Ed didn't B prep, right? It's like I don't even care about those characters. They don't even do anything. So yeah, it's like, yeah, you can gain lore, but who cares? Like gaining lore, of course, is like huge, but it's usually the effects that like break the game, right? So for example, like if you see hero, you have to remove it immediately, or else you lose the game, right? Like card's gonna draw too many cards, and then you'll lose. Must brawl, even if you have the Tremaine B prep, do whatever you need to do, right? and then Tamato is the other one, right? You let your opponent untap with Tamato, you really lose the game.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the card you must be prep or Tremaine or whatever to get it off the board. So I think once you kind of figure out what are the key cards that you need to remove, then you can decide like, oh, do I want to remove this? No, then I'm just going to continue my draw plan, right? And I think the draw plan is also very simple in Ruby Amethyst. It's like, if you have Rabbit, you obviously play Rabbit, right? But I think the hard part is like if you only have one copy, then it's like how do you not expose it to your opponent?
Mm-hmm.
Because like the one copy of Rabbit is actually extremely important, right?
No.
And I think by kind of association, like the Madam Mim cards are also very important. And I think one of the kind of huge mistakes I see kind of novice Ruby Amethyst, even like expert Ruby Amethyst players make is like just using their Madam Mims kind of as a body for like no reason. So I
Mm-hmm.
think the most common one is like I'm gonna play a one cost and then use Madam Mim on it, and then there's my 3/3 or 4/3 or whatever. Like sometimes yeah you need it for rush, but I would say like most of the time that card in your hand is extremely valuable
Mm-hmm.
because even though you don't have a rabbit right now, your next card could be a rabbit, and if it is a rabbit, then you're gonna go crazy, right? You draw the rabbit, play rabbit, bounce the rabbit. So like I really highly value the Madam Mim cards in my hand.
Mm-hmm.
Just being able to kind of bounce that rabbit, right? So I think kind of the flow chart of like playing Ruby Amethyst is like, no threat. I'm gonna start drawing or setting up some kind of board to kind of threaten my opponent, and if there is a threat, then you remove it. So after you kind of figure out that kind of general game plan, you can kind of get into the nitty gritty, like small details, right? And figuring out like what is the best thing to do against, certain decks.
Also, especially when you knew his list in the finals, you knew he has no dime. I think he was on no
Mhm.
dime version, and then you
Yeah.
even could let him getting more lore because you don't care about if they go to 10 or something. You don't care if they are on dime. It's still a bit tricky sometimes to let them get free lore, but if they are not, it's very much easier for Ruby Amethyst, I think, if they are no dime version. I think that
Yeah.
sometimes
I mean, the dime, they still have to play the card, right? And usually when they play the card, they have to like take a turn off. And,
yeah, that's true.
usually that's your window, right? To like kind of try to catch up a little bit before they just go too crazy with dime. But of course, yeah, if they play dime, you don't have any interaction, right? So you're on the clock definitely when they're on dime. But like the first thing I saw, like when I was like looking at deck list, oh, there's no dime, right? So
Yeah.
he only has 2 Pirate's Life and then a couple copies of Shark, and that's kind of the only reach that he
Mhm.
has in the entire deck. And it's not like he can just randomly burst you out of nowhere. So
Yeah.
I felt very comfortable like letting him gain some lore because at the end of the day, 19 lore is not 20 lore, right? You can have literally 19, but if I have 20, then I win the game.
Yeah.
So I think that's another lesson to learn from playing just control strategies in general. Like you have to let your opponent gain lore, right? That's just kind of the inevitability
Yeah.
of the game, right? And I think it also translates back from playing the other card games, like when you play control strategies, where it's like, how much can I let my opponent do the thing that they want to do before I must stop them,
Mhm.
right? Because usually the longer you wait, the more options that you have, and that's
Yeah.
sometimes you have to let them get it, or else you're never gonna catch up, right? If you
Mhm.
prematurely beat prep, you might lose all your cards, and then you don't have any way to get back in the game, right? I think that's the mentality of you're playing to win and not playing to not lose.
Yeah. That's true.
That's amazing. Yeah, totally makes sense. Yeah, so we've kind of been over card choices, the really great way you played, sort of pace of play and everything. The last thing that I was really impressed with on the day was your really lovely varsity style team jacket. I really like those. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I just wanted to ask you very quickly. I want to learn a little bit more about your team and the people you've been working with and hear a little bit about them, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm part of a team Tian Hu. I think we basically started as just like kind of a group of friends, and honestly, we still are a group of friends, right? And we all like are from the Bay Area, California, and I think we basically kind of started where everyone got their continental invites, right? And I think before LCQ, we actually had 5 people already qualified for continentals, and I thought that was like pretty good already, right? Not a lot of teams have like 5 people that already qualify for continentals. And then on Friday at LCQ, we had another person qualify for LCQ through the LCQ to make it to the Continental tournament. So we had 6 people make it to the tournament, and it was really nice that we can kind of work together for the same kind of goal, right? So I think having like people to bounce your ideas off of is very important. And I would say I wouldn't make it here, without the people that kind of, listened to my ideas, gave me feedback. And I think for the varsity jackets, I think we already try to plan something because we go to all these DLCs, right? Everyone has like their jerseys and their T-shirts, and then I was like, what can we do to kind of stand out also, right? And I took a lot of inspiration from like like Akuma from like Street Fighter,
Yeah.
like the
Ah,
Tian. Yeah, he has like the Tian symbol, like the symbol on the back of his shirt, right? It says Tian on it, and I thought that was like so cool, right? So I was like, how do we get the same thing on our jacket, right? So we have like one of our friends that play Lorcana, his name is Joe, and he is like a kind of like a designer, right? So we're like, okay, we want like these varsity jackets, and we want the Tian in the back. Maybe we can engrave our names and like have this logo that we can put in the front, and it's like let's just like make this like mock up real quick and see if you like it. And yeah, like the samples turned out really really nice. So we're like, yeah, let's order for the rest of the team. So yeah, like the entire team got like a jacket, and it was really nice, like being able to kind of roll up together, right? It's like kind of cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really happy with how they turned out. And
nice.
honestly, I was like very happy that they let me wear it onto the photo shoot area, because I remember
Yeah.
like we kind of actually didn't let a lot of people wear their like their team jerseys or have their like logo on the photo shoot. But for me, they're just like, yeah, you can wear the jacket. So I was like, oh, awesome, right? And they let me have it, like wear it onto the stage. But they did make me take it off for like the game, right? Like the feature matches. But after that, the celebration and the photo shoot and all that kind of stuff, they let me wear it. So yeah, I was very happy with it, and I hope to wear it, in the future for like major events.
Was Akuma your main character in Street Fighter, or did you? Or
Street
did
Fighter,
you?
oh
Or
yeah, I
did,
love the Kuma, like the punch board, the thing. Oh, that was so cool, right? I
he's
mean, I
like
just played that mostly. Yeah,
he's like Ryo and Ken, right? A bit like
yeah,
in
yeah.
Street Fighter.
Like he
Yeah.
can like shoot. He shoot like the air fireballs. Like, you can jump in the air and
Yeah.
like throw fireballs from the air. It's like kind of cheating in a way, kind of thing. But
Nice.
I always thought he was kind of cool, so I kind of wanted to get something similar. And like Tian Hu, I think so the term is kind of like, it means like God hand, right? So I think in English we wanted to be, it was honestly kind of cringe, like we were gonna be like Team Giga Nuts or Omega Giga Nuts, something stupid, right? And then we were like, okay, this is like not for Disney probably, so let's think of something better. So like we played like some mahjong, and in mahjong, like Tian Hu is like the God hand, right? And I think that's what we all strive to have, the God hand, right? And I know
Nice.
like Chris, like the guy that got second at in Vegas, he's on the team, right? And he had an Emerald Steel mirror with Zan, and then it's like, oh man, Zan always opens the God hand. It's like, well, why don't we name our team the God hand, right? So I always thought that was kind of interesting, and like the characters lined up nicely with like a Kuma thing. So I thought that was like a perfect team name for us to have.
Nice.
That's awesome. Yeah, really cool to hear. I've always been so impressed by the turnout in the especially in the United States, or at least it seems from watching the coverage. I've not been, I've not been to any tournaments in the US yet. But like you say, so many team jerseys, so many people representing their local groups. It's like a whole culture has caught on. It is growing in Europe as well, but you seem to see it less. But we need to get something to wear. We need something. I turn up in just regular clothes, and I'm like, got these cool jerseys. Like, can't I have something? Just gotta work on that, Artavex. We need to find something.
Yeah. I was very curious. Do you get nervous?
I get nervous.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think
Because
back in
you seem so chill in the it's so I would be much more nervous. I need to be more professional, I think.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I mean, being nervous is very natural, obviously, right? And I think back when I was like in DLC Texas, the Dallas one, like my first feature match was like the top 16, right? The one that you win in Mickey.
Mhm.
That one I was like super nervous, right?
Uh-huh.
Like this is like the biggest money match of my life.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think before that though, I was actually extremely happy when I got the top 16, because in Chicago I was 20th, so I didn't get my invite, right? And I was like really, really like I need to get my invite in the next one. And then after I got my invite, I think that was like actually the sigh of relief that like I worked so hard for that, right? And like I saw a lot of people at the time, you know, all the great players had invites already. You know, the R&Bs like George, Kendall, like all these great players had their invites, and it's like, you know, when is it my turn, right? So after that, I think like a lot of the stress kind of, you know, fell off, right? I was like, I got my invite, I get to go play at Continentals, great. And then the next one's like, oh, big money match Mickey, right? And I was like really nervous, but I was very fortunate that my first round was against DKP when he was playing Ruby Sapphire. And at the time, like the deck was actually very favored, even though I didn't play any Tremaines. It was still very favored against Ruby Sapphire, honestly, because some of the starts are just so fast, right? So after I beat that, I was like, you know what? It's all just for fun. Until like later, they're like, oh yeah, all the winners get, you know, world's invites. Right? Okay, they told us that. I would be like real crazy in the finals, right? But I remember everyone after that, you know, they get their Mickey, everyone's like really happy, you know, where it's like, we're just happy to be here, we'll just play the game, right? And you know, fast forward to Continentals, I think for a lot of the winners, the stress is also off, right? Where it's like, oh, no matter what happens, we're going to Worlds anyways, like who cares? I made like a, you know, a thing on Twitter. I was like, I'm just gonna play my for fun deck, right? Like I actually kind of did. Like, never played this deck. I'm just like, you know, I'm just doing whatever like I feel like I want to do, right? So it. I think throughout the day, I was just, you know, I was just like enjoying the moment, right? Just playing Ruby Amethyst, like what I love doing, right? So even though I got to like, you know, day two and stuff, personally, I wasn't too nervous. Like, you know, once you get used to like all the cameras and lights and stuff, you know, you just get in your zone and you just play the game, right? As it were. So personally, like, you know, once you play on the big stage, I feel like your nervousness kind of subsides a little bit, but you know, it's okay to be nervous like once you know, get into these like big money moments.
No.
Nice. Yeah, I just that suddenly reminded me that you basically double queued for Worlds. Somehow that slipped my mind. That's
Yeah.
an unbelievable achievement. Massively, massively well done. It's just what an amazing season you've had, and yeah, it seems pretty clear how it's happened. Not by luck.
I mean, no,
Amazing.
honestly, some of it is luck. A lot of it is like matchups, and also just, you know, I would say it's like when skill meets opportunity. That's what luck is, right? Like, you
Right.
still have to prepare and work really hard. Like if I haven't like played those thousands of hours of games, like it'd be really hard to get to where I am, I would say. So like, you know, to all the aspiring people that want to be like, you know, really good like Lorcana players, it's like everything else in life, right? You put the time in with like intentional play, right? Like I know some people just like play the game just to play it and just go through the motions, but I think it's also very important to be very intentional with your play and think about like the play patterns, and it's like, you know, I lost to this thing, like how can I replicate it, right, in my own gameplay? So I think intentional play also kind of accelerates your like learning of the game and improvement of the game, right? Just, you know, don't just go through the motions. Actually kind of think about, you know, what happened and, you know, reflect back on it.
Nice. Yeah, I know. I saw a huge difference in my own sort of win rates and results in practice games when I sort of changed the way I was approaching them. Eventually, you play so many games, it just becomes passive. Okay, I wake up, I'll play some games today. I'd like to practice, and like you say, you're just kind of going through the motions. You execute the same things. You don't think too much. And now I decided to limit myself to 5 very intentional best of 3 games a day, and just having that structure of practice. Okay, I'm fully focused on this. I'm not, nothing else is in my mind while I do it. It just, I saw a huge change in it and didn't realize quite how much I've allowed myself to go on autopilot, executing some of these lines and just being mentally present so much more and breaking that cycle and thinking more about my games, interacting more with my opponent. It was just, yeah, massive difference. So I think it's a really good piece of advice.
Mhm.
Artabax, anything else on your side for questions before I launch into my
Um,
closing
no, I think we
presentation?
also have a lot of we are yeah. I think we need to start it now, otherwise the time goes to.
Yeah, so Ed, a growing part of our culture on this cast is that we prepare. We're getting into a rhythm of preparing small games and activities without telling anybody else before, and you find out and you do it live.
Mhm.
This will be really straightforward. Um, I've got 10 sentences that I'm going to start and would like you to finish in your, this is your opinions and hopefully quite quick fire. So only thing I need from you, try not to think too hard about your answers and just let them fly. It's all related to Lorcana. There won't be any massive surprises.
Sure.
But yeah, if you're ready,
Sure.
yeah, let's go. This is just, it should be 10 sentences to learn a little bit more about Ed. So first one, the best color in Lorcana is...
Amethyst.
Good answer. The most overrated card in the game is...
Oh, that's a hard one. Genie.
Yeah. Nice. The most underrated card is...
Library.
Nice. Lorcana would be a better game if Ravensburger banned...
Diablo.
Nice. I'm really enjoying it. This is perfect. Exactly
you hear this, Ravensburger? You hear this?
Ban it. Yeah, ban the bird. Yeah.
I wouldn't be where I am today as a Lorcana player without...
My team.
Nice. More Lorcana players need to learn how to...
Sequence properly.
Draw last.
Yeah,
Draw last.
yes, the Artifacts method, always draw last. The biggest thing Lorcana needs to keep growing in 2025 is...
More events.
Yeah. If the Continental Championships were held again tomorrow, I would play...
Oh, that's a hard one. Low key, it'll be Ruby Sapphire.
Okay. I thought that might be your answer for some reason. The first World Championship will be won by...
I can't say me because that'd be like too cocky. I would probably say Zan then. Zan will win.
Okay, nice. And the last one, if you want to follow my journey and learn more from me, you should go to...
My journey would be at Ed Lorcana on Twitter and on YouTube.
Nice. Amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, that worked quite well.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. You said two things that doesn't fit together. The first thing is you want to get Diablo banned, and then you said Zan will win the world. No, I can't.
Man, like based on the current information we have presented in front of us, that's kind of the trajectory things are going, right?
Just a joke. I think Zan is also good enough to win without a bird. I think.
I'll figure out a way. I'm sure.
Yeah. Are there any shoutouts you want to make, or some things you want to talk to the community, or is there any, just anything you want to say to the community, or some shoutouts you want to make?
Yeah, I mean, I always make these shoutouts, but I think they still deserve it, right? Like, I think my team Tian Hu and SLTC, like, I think, it's very hard to, like, I always say this, it's very hard to do these kind of things alone. And I would say, like, I definitely haven't done these things alone. I think basically what happens is, like, who you become are kind of like the people that you're kind of the closest to, and you become kind of the average of them, right? So, basically who I am is just like little bits and pieces of everybody that I know, and kind of I take all that in and kind of form my own kind of thought process, right? So I think I definitely want to thank like everyone that's kind of been part of my kind of Lorcana journey. I wouldn't be here without them.
Yeah, that was a very clever sentence. I think you always get you get probably the average of your testing group. That's a really clever thing to say. I think that's because you always get only to the level in each sport also probably. You never get better than the best player you play against probably. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah.
I also want to say, like, I think a lot of people are like intimidated by like playing like better players because it's like, oh, I just lose all the time, right? And I think there's kind of two ways to kind of look at that, where it's like you do want to like quote unquote lose, but you don't want to just like lose and kind of just forget about it. Because like when you lose, I think the better way to kind of think about it is like, okay, what did this person do so well that I lost the game, right? And I think if you approach the game in that mindset, I think you would improve like way faster. And I think that also applies to everything else in life, right? Where it's like you can just like, not do well and then just say, okay, I'm just gonna lay here. Or, I can pick myself back up and, try to do the thing that other people did, right? Because like I think the best way to kind of learn is just to copy first, right?
Mm-hmm.
You copy and then you're like, oh, okay, this is kind of cool. And then you can kind of add your own spin to it. But, when you're not good at something, just copy first and then you can figure it out from there.
Yeah, yeah, and also, yeah, like I always say, it's better to see it like, yeah, what did he do better, than just saying he was lucky, because that's some natural things, many things to think. Oh, he drew that, he drew that, he drew that. He drew the nuts. I didn't draw any rabbits or something. And yeah, I mean, it's natural a bit to make an excuse for losing, but I think it won't improve you. It won't improve you. Yeah, like you say, it will always improve you. Or even if he got lucky, maybe you still had a chance to win even if he got lucky. So yeah, that's also very true. Yeah. Eddie, do you have anything to add?
No, not to add. No, just a massive thank you, Ed. It's really, really nice to get to sit
Yeah.
down and chat. Massive
of course.
congratulations again, and yeah, I'm wishing you the best of luck at Worlds. We will be watching.
Yeah.
And yeah, hope you get some news on that soon, so you know when you're going to play.
Yes.
Yeah. My entire life is on hold until then, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Ed, thanks for being here. It was an honor, and yeah, and to the people, thanks for watching, and we will see us next time. And thank you, everyone. And yeah, bye bye. Till next time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.